Okay, thank you very much. This is a very big honor to actually have been asked to be speaking here tonight to celebrate 20 years of INPM and the 80th birthday of Paul Wong. This is really a very big honor, and it's very difficult to actually say anything, particularly after all those beautiful and very meaningful talks and contributions and songs from people. Yeah, what else can I add? So I'm just going to do some of my thing where I think, particularly speaking about what you mean for me and what I think what you've meant for the field and what you mean for the field. So when we speak about celebrations, we are actually speaking about what we mean for each other. And that is what I'm going to speak about. So about your 80th birthday and the 20th birthday of the INPM. Because this is a moment where we can really take stock of like what we have been doing here together in the community about meaning, about existential therapies, about positive psychology to the zero. Like we're here together, and this is a moment to look back and also look forward towards the future and celebrate what's truly meaningful. So when I started to prepare for this presentation, I started to actually read also the autobiography of Paul. And Paul has often also been sharing his own stories in a lot of the lectures. And when I was reading your life story, I was really impressed. And I think many other people have a similar thing. That's also what I heard from a lot of the other stories from the people who were just giving you very nice words about telling how meaningful you've been and you are for them. One of the things that really struck me from your story was how you were saying, my life is an impossible dream. In the sense that you said, I've learned that life is not about winning, but about meaning, but about making the best of your life for a higher purpose in spite of all the limiting factors. My life is the story of a defiant human spirit and a divine grace working together to achieve the impossible dream of bettering humanity with little or even no resources. And we already heard even stories about where you did not have any money at all, but even giving that to others. And it happens. And then you ask yourself the question, what are the secrets of my survival and success in a harsh and turbulent world? And my answer may be surprisingly simple and yet complicated, the pursuit of meaning. And I think that we totally can connect with your life story. And that is why there's so many people here. Because that is what we experience, I think, to some extent for ourselves. We know the importance of meaning, particularly in the harsh times in the turbulent world that we live in. And you were also writing about how meaning, there are 12 core principles. You've written so many things, and what to select and what to speak about. So I thought I will just select 12 principles of meaning that reflect in a lot of your work, but also in your personal life, what I can hear from the stories. The first one is you're responsible for your own life. You need to know yourself. You need to be socially integrated. You need to have faith and believe. You need to have the courage to be true to yourself and do the right thing. You need to do something creative and significant with your life. You need to develop true grit to pursue your calling or life dream. You need the wisdom and ability to adapt to changing circumstances. You need to take you need to take the bad with the good as two sides of the same coin. You need to be appreciative and grateful. And you need a moral compass to navigate perilous waters. And you need to author a good story to live by. This is just, I think, a brilliant summary of what meaning is about. And it's so rich, there's so much in it. However, I'm missing one important aspect in here. Because when you're speaking about harsh surroundings, difficult surroundings that all of us live in, there's one thing that you have also taught me, and us, all of us. Because what we also need is a tent to survive the harsh surroundings and to meet each other. And that is what you've been speaking about, the big tent of the INPM. And Lillian has given a beautiful, meaningful overview of the history of the INPM, about the tent that you've created. And look, this is a really big tent that you've created here. And we're still all here together. And that is really impressive. and where we can meet each other and can really sit together like we're doing here tonight. So that's what I'm celebrating. In my brief talk, I'm going to celebrate this big tent that you've created. I'm going to celebrate some of the publications that you have done, but particularly also the publications that you've inspired others to do. All those students and other people, like for myself, you've inspired a lot of my work, but also others. And also about research, the research that you've stimulated. And also about, I will also look at, okay, where are we now in the field? What do we know? And where can we go to from here? So let's first start with the topic about Big Tent, because I think that may be really one of the crucial things. And that's also what we heard from a lot of the other stories from the other people about one of your secrets is connecting people and bringing people together. And that is really important in the world that we live in, because we live in a quite complex time of harsh surroundings, of a lot of political and social challenges. And that is something that we can hear also from your autobiography, but also from a lot of the lectures that I can have heard here at this conference. But also about the difficult academic paradigms. And we heard a little bit about that before, about the difficulties, about standing for the deeper values and for deeper complex topics. And also trying to bridge different paradigms in the field, like positive psychology and existential paradigm, and wanting it to focus on practitioners and researchers. That's hard work, but really important to really connect. And there's also like fighting against a culture of simplism and reductionism that we often see, unfortunately, in a lot of populist publications, by populist authors, but also by researchers and certain academic degrees. And you're saying, no, we can and we must look at the deeper and complex stories about human life. And this is the idea of the Big Tent, the idea that we come together to support each other and have a deep relationship and validate each other what we're doing. Because it's also very much the story what you're telling all the time about the meaning of social responsibility. And that's something that you can hear from a lot of the stories from everyone that I speak and who I meet here at the conference. Are much more driven to try to make the world a better place, albeit only for our clients or for ourselves, but also for the bigger questions, the bigger society. And it also strengthens through unity, about being together, the community who we are here, and the importance of that. Because together we're standing much stronger than on our own, in a small room somewhere at university or a small therapy office. It's also about innovation. New ideas happen when people come together. And also when you try to combine, like people who you actually would not imagine that they can combine. That is where innovation happens, when you really have the tough debates. And that's what happens. And that is really important. Publications. Of course, like what people have been saying, you've been an extremely prolific writer. And I was looking at, you've been cited more than 13,000 times. And that was, really a lot. And really impressive. And a lot of people here in the room, they base a lot of their work, a lot of the practices on your work. And that has helped us to validate a lot of stuff that a lot of us have been working on also in a clinical practice or in our own research. But you help us to further validate that. But also really important, particularly also with your book about the human quest for meaning, is to say, well, it's not only about doing more research, but also integrating and reviewing and conceptualizing new ideas, like having models, the ABC model, pure model, to really say, well, let's take stock. Instead of doing more new stuff, let's look, what have we done? What's the overall framework? Have a bigger picture in mind. And that, I think, is a very important message. That is what we're doing here at the conferences. And to stimulate debate, and to actually say, yes, it's possible. It's possible to speak about meaning. It is possible to have those bigger visions, to have those bigger frameworks. And to guide people with all this research, all these publications in their practice, their research, and also in their personal life. And so this is also the importance of research at the same time, where Viktor Frankl was already saying the importance of research. And he has also been collaborating with several researchers. But what I personally think, and that's my personal experience, what I've seen is how you've set the agenda for research, for evidence-based work on meaning. And that really has been crucial, I would say, in changing a paradigm in the field about the idea that we can make the invisible visible. Because who has ever thought, like 100 years ago, that we can do hardcore research on such an abstract philosophical concept as meaning? That you can even measure that with a questionnaire. I think a century ago, people would have said, you're totally crazy. But that is like now, in our community, that is like, yes, of course. And like 100 years ago, the psychology was born as a new discipline. And this is almost like the birth of a new discipline that is focusing on meaning, and which is validating a lot of our clinical and our personal experiences. And by doing this research, also to make it more meaningful, more effective. And also, really important is to stand strong in this evidence-based climate that we are in, where health insurances expect us to give big numbers. And also, yeah, there's still the debate going on and the discussions when we go to the more hardcore conferences where, yeah, they expect big numbers. They expect that. And the good thing is, you've shown us how we can do that. And we have been doing that as a community here at this conference for almost 20 years. And also it helps us to make a difference between quack science or the quack ideas from populist authors and really what really matters. And that's important because particularly about topics like meaning, there's so many gurus out there. Just Google and you find so many advice, but we try to be sensible and to really look at, okay, what works, and it seems to be important. So my next question, and I'm trying to keep it as brief as possible. I've already given a workshop about that, and my book that has come out and that is very much inspired by your work summarizes that. Because in the last years, I have really been focusing on developing like a coherent common framework. Because we have so many ideas, we have such beautiful people around, so much beautiful research. And I've been thinking, where are we now? Like I took up, like I followed you in the idea about looking at, instead of doing more new research, also looking, where are we? What's the overall perspective in our field? So I will speak about 10 key findings. People who were at my workshop will recognize some, my apologies for that. But this will also help us to show where can we go to for in the future. This is a table. This is the first finding. That is that the experience of meaning is true. It's real. It's not something that we make up, like we may have thought like 100 years ago. That is a byproduct of behaviorism, no, it is real. It's an experience that matters. This is a table that I often use with my clients. On the left, there are myths. On the right hand, there are some suggestions, what we know now from the research. About meaning is not that there's only one absolute meaning, but we have a lot of different experience of meaning. And meaning is not only like for religious or spiritual people. Absolutely, it also is, but it's for anyone. Because the fact that you're here tonight, it already shows that you've made the decision not to lie in your bed or to go partying in the town, but this is more meaningful for you. So you already know, you're already doing it. And that is something we do in daily life. We don't need to reflect on it for a long time. It's not only an abstract theory, it's a lived experience. And I think that is a lot of the basic grounds about the ways how we speak about meaning. And also, this has been validated by really lots of research, a lot of research in your publications, but also by the research from other colleagues who are here also tonight. People like Michael Stieger, Carol Riff, Ken Sheldon, and many others have really shown and validated a lot of the ideas about meaning, that yes, the experience of meaning is real. And there's so many sub-aspects that we can look at it, etc. But I think overall, the core message is, yes, it's real. And that is an important message to also carry out to the wider world, outside of those rooms. And then the bigger question is, okay, what is that then the thing that we speak about meaning? The thing is, I usually prefer to speak about living a meaningful life. So meaningful, it's more like an adjective. Because when you say the word, what is meaning of life or meaning in life, then you can become a little bit complicated. And having been here at the conference and having spoken with many, many people, what I get is meaning is not this or that, and it's a sum of that. No. Living a meaningful life is like sailing through life. It's the total experience. Because if you ever go sailing, you know that when you sail, you cannot say it's only sailing towards that one particular goal, sailing towards a lighthouse. No, it's a total experience of everything involved. So when we look at the literature and we look at how people speak in an empirical way about what is meaning, it's about, yes, having lighthouses, things, goals, purposes, a direction where we move towards, where our motivation is about. Oh yes, we have that, absolutely. We move towards that lighthouse. However, it's also more than that. Because when I go sailing, I have a value that I'm not going to use a motor. No, of course, I'm going to use my sails. I'm a proper sailor. So I use my values. And that's also what we do in life, when it's about living a meaningful life, using our values. It's also about knowing our place in the surroundings, having like a map. Knowing where we are in life, knowing our context, our social context, cultural context, also our existential context, knowing where we are. It's also about navigating. It's about knowing how to set goals, how to control the situation, and adjust our direction. It's also about self-worth. And self-worth is the idea about feeling worthy enough to say, yes, I take my sailing boat, and yes, I will go on the water and follow my values, follow my goals. Self-worth is an important aspect we often hear at a lot of lectures. And also it's about actually doing, and not only theorizing, but actually living. And also particularly the theme of this particular conference is also about the existential aspects, about combining and looking at, it's not only positive, but it's also looking at existential skills. We heard Emmy van Deurzen this morning about how important that is to also integrate that. So the experience of meaning is all of this. It's a total experience where it's important to really say, let's not continue debating about what is the ultimate one thing that meaning is about, because meaning is all of that. The next question is, where do people find meaning? People find meaning in many different sources, so in many waterfalls, as I have shown it here. And I did a big literature review, and that's in line with a lot of the research from others. And that's particularly also in line with the 12 sources and other work that Paul has done on where do people find meaning. And I was really inspired by that. And I thought I would like to update that and look worldwide in all the studies that have been done, in which people were asked, where do you find meaning in life? And I found 107 studies in 45,000 people worldwide. And I analyzed that and I found 5 different categories where people say they find meaning. The first types of meanings are the materialistic and the hedonic types of meanings. So that's very much about the body, the physical world. It's about material possessions, our security, our career, our success in education, and also hedonism, having fun. But there's also more than that. There are also self-oriented meanings. And these are about the self, about self-efficacy, self-acceptance, autonomy, self-care. Focus lies on me, on my personal development. And then we are also embedded in a social environment, so there are social meanings. And social meanings, they are about belonging to a community, social connections, altruism, contributing to the wider community, taking care of children. And then there are larger meanings. They are about specific higher purposes, personal growth, or trying to create the world into a better place, social justice, but also religion. And finally, there are also those more existential types of meanings, where when I ask, for instance, my clients, often I hear them say, well, it's just meaningful that I'm alive, that I'm breathing, that I'm connected, that I'm there, that I'm unique. So that is the fact that we can find meaning in that. So the thing is, people find meaning in all those different sources of meaning. And this is what I hear from a lot of the work, from a lot of you. And also when I was looking at some of the poster presentations, I could see some amazing work from students about showing how people find meaning in difficult situations even. And the thing is, like, what we also know from this research, what I found is that the materialistic, hedonistic, and self-oriented types of meanings are associated with lower well-being, mentally and physically. And that's an interesting observation. And I think that also our community here is a good example where we focus very much on building a community, being together and focusing on something larger than ourselves. And I think that we're doing this, of course, because we believe in that is good to do that anyhow, but it's also good for our mental health that we're here. So this has been really good for you. Sorry for the little bit bloody picture. The picture is saying, living a meaningful life is experiencing meaning without an instruction manual given at birth. It would have been so great sometimes if, particularly when we need to make decisions in our lives, if we can just look up for ourselves in our instruction manual, oh, this is how I function, this is how I should be. However, we don't have that. I don't know how it is for you, but I was not given such a manual at birth. But the thing is, like, also to this conference particularly has been about the question, like, how can you combine it? How can you live a meaningful life despite of the meaninglessness? And there are many discussions we've had, particularly at this conference. How can we live a meaningful life despite the fact that often we're limited human beings. We're not totally sure about things in life. There are uncertainties, there are paradoxes. We heard Emmy about that this morning. But how can we still live a meaningful life? There's a lot of research on that, on showing that we can do both at the same time. And this is very much also what Paul has been standing for in a lot of your research, whereas when you try to integrate the existential bits, the positive sides, and saying, well, it's not only about all the positive stuff, and it's also not only about the negative stuff. Now, so I see this as like a two-axis system, where on the x-axis you can see therapies that range from no focus on meaninglessness, or on the existential side, to therapies that focus very much on the meaninglessness. And on the y-axis, you can see therapies that focus on meaning or don't focus on that. Like, I know this is very stereotypical, so my apologies for that. People will be absolutely angry about this, I know. But for instance, stereotypically, a behavior therapist, a traditional one, and a bad one, I would personally say, would not have much focus on meaningless or on the meaningfulness. And so I've put them totally in the left. But what happened with, I think, the latest development is where actually meaning-centered therapy has been going more into this integration. The integration of looking at both at the same time. And also, I will show later that a lot of the research, when I look at meta-analysis, that the meta-analyses are showing the importance of doing both at the same time. That we cannot, and I would even say personally, like, we should not only focus on the positive or only on the negative. That's also what we see from all the research. At this conference, there were also several people speaking about education. And they are much better equipped to speak about that than I am. But when I did a scoping review about how do people develop meaning, I found that it often has to do with a balancing act between what we learn from in our childhood about the things that we must do, the things that we can do, things like my physical abilities, my cognitive abilities, etc. And also what I want to do. And this is like a balancing act, like what must I do or not, or what can I do? And so it's a balancing act. And that's what I hear a lot about also at this conference when I was listening to some educational or developmental talk. But I think that that's really important. And this is a part, I think, in the field that can be developed much, much further. And I will keep this one very brief. But this slide is about the key finding, about that the question about meaning, the theorizing bit, comes up when we're actually like stuck, when we're out of the flow of our daily lives. That is also, particularly when we look at positive psychology, that is paying a lot of attention to flow, mindfulness, happiness, etc. So it's very much about being inside the hot flow of experiencing, like we are there and we go in the flow. We don't reflect on it. We're not like sitting down then and having to think. No, we are in that flow. However, there are times in our life that we're not in that flow. And that suddenly it feels as if we're outside. It's almost a cold experience. And that's why people start to use words as the meaning of life in capital letters. And also that's about theorizing, reflecting, and reflecting on reflections. That's what Viktor Frankl called hyper-reflection and hyper-intention. Really, really wanting something so much that actually you're putting yourself out of your own experiences, out of that hot flow of experiencing. And to think by bringing together the positive psychology and the existential therapies, that's actually bringing together, like, how does it work? How does that work together? Like, when do we ask us theoretical questions? When do the theoretical questions work? And when do we really want to get into a flow? How do we do that? The next thing that's really crucial is, and this is, I'm going to leave this very, very brief, that is that, similar like in our childhood, we were told, eat your vegetables. When I'm going to this conference, I'm being told, live a meaningful life. In a quite similar way. And I hope that in future, our parents are gonna, or actually we, our children, are gonna teach their children, live a meaningful life. Next to your asparagus and your broccoli, also eat that. But next to that, live a meaningful life. Because that's what we know from a lot of research. And I think your book on the human quest for meaning, with all the brilliant authors, a lot of whom are actually here in this room, which has shown the importance of meaning. Meaning is so important for psychological well-being, but also for our physical well-being. And I would say just read all Paul's papers, all the books, and all the stuff from a lot of the other people here. They're much better to say that. But let me speak a little bit about mental health care. Mental health care, that's very much also a topic we're speaking about. We're speaking here about what can we really do with this? What can we do with this knowledge? And I would say there's so many different types of meanings and the therapies. I have counted. When I did literature review, I found 30 different schools of meanings and the therapies. 30. And some differences are small. Some are much bigger. But the biggest difference is between schools that give little systematic and explicit attention to meaning, and those that do that much more. Because I see it as a continuum. Because I would say every good therapist, even when they're not trained as a meaning-centered therapist or as an existential therapist, of course they help the client to live a more meaningful life. If you, for instance, go to a traditional behavior therapist and you're being treated for a phobia for dogs, and where you can get rid of the xenophobia, the nice thing is that finally you dare to go on the street again, and suddenly you can go outside and live your life there. So suddenly your life becomes much more meaningful. So of course, I would say any good therapists will help a client to live a more meaningful life. However, the difference is how explicit and how systematic do we address meaning. And there are many examples of that, including the meaning therapy and all the work that you've developed, Paul, and how you've inspired people all over the world in really following your models and really working on that. And I'm still looking forward to your manuals and more books on that. I think that's so crucial to really look on how do we do it. Because it's also like what I was saying, it's like all effective therapies have in common that they improve the client's well-being. And I think a lot of research is showing that. When we look at the so-called common factors theory, all therapies are effective because they help you live a more meaningful life. And you also see that a lot of therapies help people actually to improve the quality of life. But particularly meanings and therapies seem to be particularly effective. You're not going to read this. And also not this. But I'm just showing this. These are just two models that I started to create when I was doing some literature reviews on the role of meaning in physical health care. And I think that this is, like, particularly for the future, really important to also look more towards the importance of, like, that meaning is really central. Because quite literally, like, this is a model about how do people cope with cardiovascular disease. I see in the middle, it's how do I cope with the stress? How do I live a meaningful life, despite of my physical problems? And I think that particularly in physical and in chronic and life-threatening diseases, particularly in those boundary situations in life, particularly then it's important to address meaning. Because that's what we know from the clinical literature, that there is the gap. And there is where we can have a big meaning. And also, what can we do then if we have a client? So when I looked at all the 30 schools, which are also evidence-based, I looked at, okay, what do they actually do? What are the core competencies that they have in common? And I found 39 therapist competencies. And from these, I just categorized them in 5 categories. The first one are assessment skills. So that's about identify the relevance of meaning for this client. Possibly it's not. And also look at meaning-specific skills. So how to address meaning. And there are thousands of different ways, and that's what we're speaking about. We also know that relational skills are important. We can only address meaning when we have a good relationship with the client. And there are also the phenomenological, experiential, and mindfulness skills. So that's very much all skills that help you not to stay inside your head. Because that's what I mentioned before about meaning is not only theoretical, it's not only the big questions about the meaning, it's about living a meaningful life, being inside that hot flow. And for that, we need those types of exercises. And finally, there are the existential skills, which are really important. How to address the existential limitations, how to cope with the paradoxes in life. So these are some of the skills, and each of the skills are evidence-based. That is the state where we are now. Because this is a meta-analysis that I did, and I found 60 studies, 60 clinical trials worldwide on meaning-centered therapies. And the conclusion is meaning-centered therapies have a large effect on the psychological stress and quality of life. So people are less depressed, less anxious, people feel a more meaningful life, people feel more self-efficacious, and people say they have better relationships after meaning-centered therapy, on the short term and on the long term, and compared with control groups, compared with other therapies. So this is a very big conclusion that what we're doing here is evidence-based. And meaning-centered therapy does work. And this is a very important message to really tell the world, I would say. And also, this is very much thanks to living, actually improving and helping people to have those meaning-centered skills. And what I found is that all those different schools, they did not really differ in effectiveness. And this is also showing how all our different approaches, all of us may look different here in the room, but in the end, it seems that the systematic and explicit attention to meaning, particularly combined with also addressing the existential parts, particularly then, all of us will be effective. So this is why we need to meet in a big tent and not only focus on all our differences, and because we have so much in common. So I'm going to come now to my conclusions and look at the future. This is like my last bit. Looking at the future, I dare to say, having reviewed the literature, I dare to say we have extremely solid foundations. After 20 years of INPM, more years of research by Paul, more research years of many others here also in the room, we are here now at a stage where for the foundations of speaking about meaning, working with meaning, I would say is really evidence-based. It does make sense. And I dare to say we can take pride in that. We can celebrate that and be confident. And to share those ideas and expand. So the question is about what shall we do with this big tent? I think the big tent, let's continue celebrating this. To continue and make this attractive for more people. To build communities where people can come together. And empower people via the organization. Explicit invite other communities. That is what Paul and Lillian have been doing all those years. Inviting people who actually are not already part of us, but all the time looking at who else can we invite? So I personally think not only existential research are positive, but also sociologists, neurologists, political activists, and a lot of them have been here. And it's unlimited, I would say. I look very much also at young generations, looking at trainees, looking at who can we really train and help also in education and make it accessible for everyone. And for instance, using online resources like we're now doing this live broadcasting. I hope a lot of people are watching this. And also listening to one of the mottos from Paul is, my happiness is to bring happiness to the suffering people. I think that also as a community, we have also a responsibility. And that's just my personal opinion, but I hope that all of you will share that with me. And that's to reflect on our social responsibility from the expertise we have, knowing the solid foundations that we have. Looking at how can we contribute to creating a world in which everyone has the opportunities to live a meaningful life. And who else can we create in our quest for this more meaningful world? Who else can help us with that? Possibly in education, politics, activists, artists. And how can we make our work more available that also other communities who have not heard about us can actually also get educated by us, by stuff online, really accessible books, community events. And that's also stuff that I, for instance, heard this morning from Bob Niemeyer. And we are at this moment also in London, also organizing conferences because we're getting so inspired. And also continue the publications, what we're doing here. And the research to really show, yes, where are we now? Take stock of what we know and also translate it into practice. Have joint research statements. That's my final slide. This is one of the, when I was reading your autobiography, this was one of the last things that you were saying. My task on earth is not done yet. I'm still struggling and pursuing my ideals. This verse rings in my ear every day. When Joshua had grown old, the Lord said to him, "You are now very old, and there are still very large areas of land to be taken over. I invite all of you, young and old, to join me in this epic struggle to create a better world." And I'm trying to join you in that quest. And I really hope that everyone here is also joining you in that quest. And I would like to invite Gordon, because we have been speaking about a big tent and what you have created. And we have a present for you from all of us to say thank you very much for everything you've done, Paul and Lillian.
By the way, this will be back here for anyone else who hasn't signed it. We'll have it out tomorrow so people can catch it. And tonight, if you'd like. Not too late.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you for all of you here. And the last words by my lovely husband.
I want to thank all of you for coming here, for all the nice things you say, and my heart really moved. I'm glad you are here, but I come to my funeral and say those things. And I also want to thank my wife and all the hardworking staff to make it possible. Give them a hand. Finally, I want to thank God who make it possible. Amen.
Now, we are trying to cut down sugar, but there is a beautiful cake here. So before you go, would you come? There's plate, forks, and everything else, and have a piece of birthday cake. And have a peaceful, wonderful night. And thank you for being here.